Hi guys, welcome to lesson 6. Let's get started. We're going to be learning about verbs. So today we will revise what we know about verbs. We're going to learn about different types of verbs and practice identifying and using the finite and infinite forms of verbs. So if you have your English book, that's great. You can make a few notes. You might want some colored pens or something nice to write with. If you don't have your book, you can write nicely on a piece of paper and keep some notes for yourself. Good. Let's revise what we know about verbs. Verbs describe actions or states, such as running, walking, having, or being. So you may know them as doing words or action words. So let's remind ourselves what we know about verbs. Verbs can express physical actions, like dancing, walking, jumping, shouting. Verbs can express mental actions, like thinking, dreaming, pondering, wondering. Verbs can also express states of being, like to be or to exist. Have you got it so far? Good. Now we're going to move on to something that you're less familiar with. Right. So today I'm going to show you how verbs can be divided into two separate categories. You know, when you were in younger grades, you learned the basics, like a verb is a doing word. But now that you're getting into older grades, we're going to look closer and closer at those concepts. So the first category of verbs we call finite. The second category we call non-finite. There are three kinds of finite verbs, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. We have the principal verb, the linking verb, and the auxiliary verb. In terms of non-finite, we have the infinitive, the gerund, and the participle. Now, I would like you to write these down in your book. So if you'd like to pause and draw a little diagram similar to mine in your book, that would be wonderful. I don't need you to learn which three are finite and which three are non-finite, so you don't need to learn these words off by heart in parrot fashion. But I would like you to have an idea that we divide verbs into two kinds of verbs, finite and non-finite, and that there are different verbs which we're going to be learning about. So in grade 7 next year, you'll learn a lot about the gerund, for example. So as long as you are aware that there are different types of verbs beyond just knowing that a verb is a doing word. Today we're going to look at two. We're going to focus on the idea of the finite verb versus the infinitive. So we're going to look at those two ideas today. Let's have a closer look at finite verbs. Finite verbs have a subject, so we know a verb is a doing word. Someone needs to be doing that action. Someone or something needs to be doing. The finite verbs usually have a tense, so by looking at the verb in a sentence, we can get an idea of the tense of the sentence, whether the action was done in the past, the present, or whether it will be done in the future. And finite verbs can give us a clue if they can be singular or plural. So here are some examples of words which are often in sentences acting as finite verbs. So for example, shop. If we say I shop, or I buy, or I save, you can see that those verbs have a subject. In this case it was I. They have a tense, so they give you a clue as to whether it happened yesterday, today, or tomorrow. And they also help us to understand whether the sentence is singular or plural. Let's have a closer look at infinitive verbs. Now, the infinitive form of a verb is the root verb and it's preceded by the word to. So we include two things. It can be formed with a present participle, for example, ing, and I'll talk a little bit about that another time. So it might seem a little bit confusing. Don't worry if you're not getting every single concept right now, as long as you know that there are two kinds of verbs, finite and infinitive or infinite, and we're going to look at the difference now. Here's an example of a sentence. I want to study. Can you see some verbs in that sentence? I can see a few words which could be verbs. I want to give you a clue here. Some of these verbs are infinite. So let's have a closer look. Can you see which verbs are infinite? Those two words, to study, make up the infinite verbs in the sentence, the infinitive form of the verb study. Let's see why. First of all, can you see the root verb in that sentence? It's study. It's preceded by the word to. So in front of the root verb, there's the word to. Yes, we've ticked off two things on our list. Now, we don't always need to use a present participle. We don't always add ing. But we can see from those two clues that it is the infinitive form of the verb study. Yay, we found the infinitive verb. Now, I'm going to give you a clue. I'm going to say that in the sentence we have more than one verb. And now I want you to find the finite verb in this sentence. I want to study. Right. Did you see it? Right. Want in the sentence is acting as a finite verb. Want is a doing word or an action. Okay. It's finite because it doesn't have a to preceding it, and it's just a normal, straightforward, common verb. It has a subject, I, and it gives us an idea of the tense. It's present tense, want, not wanted. And we can see in the sentence there, we've got two different kinds of verbs. So, every sentence needs a verb. If a sentence does not have a verb, then it's not a sentence. Then it's just a group of words. Maybe a phrase or a clause, or just two words clinging together. To make a sentence, there needs to be a action or a doing word. Some sentences have more than one verb. So, for example, you could say, today I was climbing, jumping, eating, sleeping, reading. And a verb could be finite or infinite. You can pronounce the word infinite. I like to use the pronunciation infinite just so that you can remember easily that finite and infinite work together. So, here's another note for you to take down. Again, I'm not going to ask you in a test or exam, list what a finite verb has, or list what the infinitive form of the verb has. But I would like you to have this as a reference, so that when you're trying to identify verbs, you can go back and have a look and see what each kind of verb should look like. So if you want to press pause now and take down these notes, you can draw a similar diagram if you like, or you can take them down quite plainly. I don't mind. Alright, well done. Make sure that you've made some study notes in your book or on a piece of paper. The next video will explain the language practice exercises on page 81 of your textbook. If you want to prepare, you can go and read the notes at the top of page 81, and I will put the questions on the slide in case you don't have your textbook. But if you have your textbook, then you can already try the questions on page 81 on your own. That's question 1 and 2. Right. Good job.